Hello friends, welcome to yet another session on essay perspectives. The topic for today is the world of reality has its limit, the world of imagination is boundless. As always friends, I have a personal request. My book on ethics, integrity and aptitude, third edition has been released. Unfortunately, even third edition has been pirated, but pirated copies are of very low print and paper quality, so I urge all of you to buy original. So original copies can be bought from the seller Flipkart on Arvind India on Flipkart and from the seller affordable on Amazon. Friends, as I often suggest, before starting an essay, we need to conceptualize the essay as being made of various components and subcomponents. So this essay also has been conceptualized like this. So first we would introduce the topic, then we would explain the essence of the topic, then we would explore the relationship between reality and imagination. Then we would discuss the role of education in reality and imagination. So then we would conclude. Friends, I feel the best way to start this essay is by referring to the movie 83, which got recently released, which is recreation of India's success in 1983 World Cup. See, in that movie, friends, India versus Zimbabwe match, I think, the match that qualifies India to semi-finals. In that match, actually, so when India loses 4 wickets for 9 runs, correct? So everybody... the reality was that India was going to lose the match. India would be thrashed, India would face humiliating defeat in the hands of Zimbabwe. That was the reality when India lost 4 wickets for only 9 runs. But later, when that was the reality, the reality had its own limitations. Correct? What was that limitation? Already 4 down. So all top performing batsmen are already in pavilion. So there are only the tailenders, only some batsmen have to keep the India's hopes high. Correct. So thus the reality had its own limitations. But when everybody was looking at the reality, the captain of the team, Kapil Dev, had imagination. What was his imagination? No, even at this point of time, he imagined that if India would strike back strongly, they would be able to hit back Zimbabwe mercilessly. Correct. So that was he imagined that even in such limiting realities, so still there is scope for imagining bigger things, and even in such tiring circumstances, his imagination later translated into reality, and he was able to score the highest runs in the world cricket till then, and then he was able to take India to success. Correct. So thus here there were 2 things. One is reality was that India was in a very bad position, so that 9 for 4. But however, the imagination is boundless. There is nothing to limit your imagination. So even in that tiring circumstances, restricting circumstances, the captain had the guts to imagine things beyond reality. Whatever he imagined, he was able to translate that imagination into reality. That's how India was able to win that match, qualify to semi-finals, and then eventually lift the trophy. Correct? So this is how you can start the topic. Friends, as I always tell you, in philosophical essays, we need to give lot of emphasis on elaborating the essence of the topic itself. Okay. So here, what are the keywords in the topic? There are 2 keywords. So the first one is reality, and the second one is imagination. Correct. So what is reality? So let us try to explain or elaborate the term reality. Reality is physical, tangible and physical existence. Whatever we are able to see, whatever we are able to hear, whatever we are able to touch, whatever is physically present is reality. Correct? So then what is imagination? While reality is physical, tangible existence, imagination is intangible, psychological visualization. Correct? Something that is not existing in physical form. So for such things which don't exist in physical tangible form, we can visualize them intangibly, we can visualize them psychologically, that element of visualization which is intangible and psychological is what we call imagination. Okay, then we can give one illustration also. For example, friends, let us take a civil service aspirant who hails from a rural area, schooled completely in a vernacular language, hailing from a very poor background. Correct. For him to clear this exam, what is the reality before him? The reality is that this exam expects you to read newspapers like Hindu to understand the things, for which you should develop at least minimum understanding level of English. Second, for cracking this exam, you need to invest 1 or 2 years of your life and totally focus on preparation. But for this rural guy, he has to take care of his family, which is not possible. And for cracking this exam, this fellow should also have to make multiple trips to different places to gather material, to collect books, or to meet someone for guidance, etc., etc., etc. For him, and the person, he has to compete with persons who are from IIT, who are from IIM, who are schooled in English, who are schooled in top schools, and who hail from a very comfortable financial background, etc., etc. Correct. So for him, this reality presents lot of limitations. Correct. Limitation in the form of lack of finances, limitation in the form of inability to set aside 1 or 2 years for preparation, limitation in the form of understanding newspapers like Hindu and understanding very difficult articles, etc., etc. Correct. But these are all the three, this is the reality, but reality has its own limitations. Correct. But such a student, though the physical reality has its own limitations, his psychological mindset, he can imagine anything. See, he can imagine to learn English, he can imagine to do work at the same time study using internet, he can imagine to take leave during the exams and invest and focus on work during other times, and somehow balance time and ensure that he need not have to compromise, or he need not have to forego some occupation in order to prepare for this exam. Correct. So thus all these things are imagination. No, I'll work till 2 o'clock and then come back and study. So whenever there is lunch break, half an hour, I'll sit and I'll read, I'll understand, I'll see through WhatsApp, I'll learn from internet, etc., etc. So thus, though the reality presents lot of limitations, but that imagination has no limitations. Correct. So it is this imagination that will fuel the fire inside that aspirant to break the shackles, to break the limitations and emerge out successful. There are n number of such stories in civil services. All of us are aware. Correct. So like that, you can give an example to connect the meaning of reality and imagination. Then friends, we need to see the topic is not just reality and imagination, right? The topic is that the world of reality has its limitations, the world of imagination is boundless. So first we have to discuss as to why the world of reality is limited. See, the first and foremost thing is the world of reality is limited because it is already existent. It is already done and dusted. So whatever is already there, that means there is a boundary for that. Correct. Whatever is not there is a bigger canvas in which you can do whatever you want. So thus the nature of reality itself has its own limitations. You have done something, you are seeing something. When you are seeing something, it is already done. What else can you do? Before doing anything, you have to imagine, right? So thus the nature of reality itself says that it is limited. On the same note, imagination is something psychological. It is not existing. Whenever something is not existing, you can think of anything related to that. Thus imagination is always unlimited. So it is important for us to explain as to why reality is limited, why imagination is unlimited. Whatever is already there, it is there because that is why it is limited. Whatever is not there, you can try to fill it anything. So there is sky is the limit. Perhaps even sky is not the limit for imagination. Correct. So the more you think, the more you imagine, the more you end up getting ideas. So that is the truth. So once we have explained the essence of the topic itself, friends, now it is important for us to explore the relationship between reality and imagination. The first and foremost plank of that relationship is who is first, whether reality is first or whether imagination is first. Correct. So what is reality, what is imagination, we have already explained. Friends, don't you think that before you make something, before you do something, the same thing gets imagined in anyone's brain? Correct. So thus, let us take an example. So let us take how the people were traveling before. They were traveling by a cart drawn by a horse or a mule or a bull or any animal for that matter. Then somebody imagined, so why should we have to depend on these animals? Can we not have a cart being drawn by some other power which is more efficient, which takes us to the destinations faster, saving time, saving energy, and also reducing the burden unnecessarily being put on animals? Correct. Somebody imagined like that. So then they were able to invent an automobile. Correct. So Carl Benz for that matter. So everybody was astonished. So what I'm trying to tell you is, the reality, today's reality is yesterday's figment of imagination. Anyone for that matter, you first imagine and then only you will do, no? Take another example. So let us take the example of Swami Vivekananda. Let us take the example of Dadabhai Nauroji or Gandhiji for that matter. So they actually, before starting the freedom struggle, they imagined that India, they imagined India being a free nation. So that imagination only gave them the strength to fight against British. Correct. So thus it appears apparently that imagination is the first and it is precursor to reality. But is it so always? No. There are some situations where even reality becomes a precursor to imagination. Correct. Because reality acts as a trigger point for imagination. Correct. So let us take the same example of automobile. Okay. Initially the automobile, there were, carts were being drawn by animals. So then humans, somebody imagined, why should we not go for a cart being drawn by some other power? Correct. Here also, what is something that triggered this imagination for having an automobile? It is the reality of a cart being drawn by an animal, right? Okay, let us go one step ahead. So once you have invented a cart drawn by some fuel, fossil fuel or etc., that is car or automobile. Once you see the automobile, then you start thinking that it is emitting so much of carbon dioxide, it is polluting the environment. Then we would imagine going to an automobile that would emit less. We would imagine an automobile that would take us faster. We would imagine an automobile that looks classy, that looks flamboyant, that is more comfortable. Correct. So thus in most of the times, it is the reality that triggers the imagination, and that imagination gives birth to a new reality. So thus imagination and reality feed into each other. It is very difficult to conclude who is first. They are complementary. Okay, it is like a cycle. In other words, the world of limited reality triggers the world of unlimited imagination. That world of unlimited imagination would translate itself into limited reality. Correct. See, since every imagination does not get translated at once, so reality is always limited. See, if whatever a person can imagine, if we are able to translate everything into reality immediately, then perhaps even the world of reality would have been unlimited. Correct. So thus, though we imagine endlessly, our ability to translate that endless imagination into reality is restricted, is limited. Maybe because of lack of technology at that point of time, maybe because of lack of finances, maybe because of some other reasons. Correct. So thus the stage may not have been set for endless imagination to get translated into endless reality. So thus what we would do, given the circumstances, within the framework of circumstances, only a portion of unlimited imagination would get translated into reality. That is why reality becomes limited. Now that we have explained that it is reality that at times trigger imagination. So then the second thing is conditioning. What is this conditioning? Sometimes reality conditions the imagination also. That means what I am trying to tell you is sometimes reality can clip the imagination also. Okay, let me explain, let me illustrate. Let us say there is a physician, there is a doctor who has come up with a peculiar disease. Correct. So in such a scenario, the doctor decides to do a deep dive into the that disease and wants to come up with a solution. So he starts imagining what could be the solution or what could be the treatment for that particular disease. Correct. Since he is a trained doctor, let us say he is a trained doctor in allopathy. Correct. So all his imaginations get restricted within the four walls of allopathy. He would only think of different chemicals, he would only think of different drugs, he would only think of the ways in which the problem that treat with disease can be treated in allopathy. Correct. But however, it may be very well likely that that disease may have treatment, that disease may have solution in Ayurvedic or homeopathy or Unani or Siddha or naturopathy, whatever. Correct. So thus the reality of this fellow being trained in one particular discipline restricts his imagination. Maybe within that four walls, within that four corners, maybe his imagination is unlimited. But however, he does not go beyond the four walls and then think. So this is where interdisciplinary coordination comes into picture, friends. So only when we are able to synthesize 2 or 3 disciplines, our world of imagination becomes even bigger, even better. So thus, so many times reality conditions and restricts the imagination also. Then friends, the third thing is whether one can exist without the other. That means whether reality can exist without imagination or whether imagination can exist without reality. The answer is no. They are complementary actually. If reality is absent, normally there is no starting point for imagination. But if imagination is absent, new realities would not get created. So normally what happens is, it is reality conditions imagination, that imagination would get translated to reality. As I told you earlier, they feed into each other, it's a cycle. So thus one cannot exist without the other. So I think it's important for us to explore the relationship between reality and imagination in this essay, because the essay is all about complementing imagination at the same time while slowly undermining reality. Correct. Because we say reality is limited and imagination is unlimited. On the face of it, it appears that imagination is important, not the reality, but it's not so. So the only reason why I had to explain this thing is explain the relationship is that because both are important, both complement each other, both feed into each other. It's a cycle. Correct. So both are important. You should see the element of analysis, which I always stress in my essays, get included in this point itself actually. So the moment you see the essay, normally the tendency is to just bat for imagination and then undermine the reality, so which is not true, which is not correct. So we have to first set the stage and state that both reality and imagination are important because both are complementary, etc. etc. However, their nature itself is like that. Reality is limited, imagination is unlimited. That's it. So you cannot subordinate one to another. Then once we have explained that, friends, the next logical point is it's important for us to talk about role of education in creating, what is the role of education in the backdrop of reality and imagination? Let's put it that way. So the first thing is, what is the role of education? Role of education has to first teach the reality. That is what we call common sense, correct? So the education should give scholastic knowledge about the existing physical realities. Maybe that physical reality could be science, could be physical science, could be life science, could be society, could be humanity, whatever, correct? So the first and foremost thing is, education has to teach the reality. The ultimate aim of one of the ultimate aims of education should be to give proper sense of reality to the students, correct? A student who understands the reality better is better equipped to imagine better, is better equipped to create new things, is better equipped to do better than the student who does not understand the reality. This is very important for civil services servants also. The whatever we are studying in GS 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., the entire objective of the nature of exam is designed in order to incorporate the sense of reality and the sense of imagination both, correct? So this whatever we study, like GS 1, 2, 3, 4 is an attempt to give the taste of reality to the civil servants, okay? Next thing is, education cannot get itself restricted to teaching the reality. It has to go one step ahead, and it has to train the students to think beyond reality. This is what we call creativity also. An education system which just imparts the physical reality without any scope for the person to think beyond reality is half education. It does not serve any purpose, okay? So that's why if you observe the textbooks, okay, in the textbooks of NCERT or even for state board textbooks, so you will have boxes where they will give food for thought, where they will suggest experiments, where they will give activities for the students, because that would train the person to think beyond reality. Even in the civil services exam also, the whole idea is a person who understands the reality through studying these subjects actually should be in a better position to imagine better and produce out of the box solutions through his imagination in the field. That is the whole purpose, okay? So thus the second thing is, the education has to train the person to go beyond reality. See, this is why, friends, actually that sense of inquisitiveness, quest for new reality has to be necessarily a part of our curriculum. We should train the students, encourage the students to question the reality. We should encourage the students to experiment things beyond reality. If someone is coming up with some ideas beyond reality, we have to encourage such students. So if such students are encouraged, so they will create whole new realities. So if you recollect from the Wings of Fire of Abdul Kalam was fascinated by the flying of birds, so that actually strengthened his imagination, where he went on to study aeronautical engineering and he made a lot of contribution to that field, correct? So thus the second form important of education is to train to go beyond reality. So mostly in our education system, what happens is, reality is taught, but training to go beyond reality is not taught, because that is not tested in the examination. So that is the fallacy of our education system. Then the third thing is, since reality per se is of very little value, reality with imagination can only lead to better things. It's important for the education to make students aware of the limits of reality. As I told you, sometimes the example of a physician that I was explaining to you, that physician, in that he was trained in allopathy, so he thinks in allopathy, Correct. So that's why so many times the solutions lie in synthesizing two or more branches, two or more unrelated branches. So there's only when we bring two or three more unrelated branches, we come up with more creative, more beneficial, more equitable solutions. Correct. So that's why, friends, most of the times children come up with fresh ideas. Why do children come up with fresh ideas? That is because children are not conditioned by any reality, so they think out of the box. See, because sometimes actually, friends, my personal experience, once I was switching on the lights, switching off the lights, and we were playing this game. I was playing this game with my daughter. So there, suddenly, instead of saying switching on the light, my daughter said switch off the darkness. Later she started saying switch on the darkness. What does actually it means? By saying switching on the darkness, she was asking me to switch off the light. But for us, we are conditioned by the education system in such a way that we should always say switch on the light, switch off the light. But alternately we can very well say switch on the darkness, switch off the darkness. So thus children are mostly fresh in their outlook. So that's why so many times the solutions come from people who are not experts, who are not professionals, who are amateurs. Correct? I want to recollect the movie Three Idiots here. In the movie Three Idiots, actually, while our virus, the principal talks about that great pen. Actually, everybody, he talks about how billions of rupees have been spent on inventing that pen. So it was... Amir Khan, who comes out Rancho, who says that why did they not use pencil? Of course. So that reality has actually restricted the experts, the scientists, but only a new person without having those tags of reality would be able to think better. So thus our education's objective should be to create that awareness in students. Correct. So it's important then only if an education system is able to teach reality properly, if an education system is able to train students to go beyond reality, if the education system is able to impart the sense of limitations of the reality in the students, then perhaps we would have better inventions, we would have better ways of doing things. So that would be a better way to create a better society. Okay. So then, friends, it is the time to conclude. So friends, again I want to link the introductory example illustration to conclusion also. See, in the same India versus Zimbabwe match where India was down for 9/4, everybody would be like the reality is that India would lose and would face a crushing defeat at the hands of Zimbabwe and would return home. But it was only Kapil Dev who imagined that India would be able to still come out of that humiliating position and India would still be able to win the World Cup. Correct? Win that match and subsequently World Cup. Correct? So here in the conclusion I want to recollect the character Ballu. Maybe, the director may have taken cinematic liberty there, and if you recollect that that Ballu is always like, "Arey yaar, you just make 100 runs. Our Izzat will be preserved." Then, "Arey yaar, just make 125 runs. Just make 150 runs." Correct? So that's how, even in the imagination, that Ballu was actually restricting his imagination, while Kapil Dev was not restricting his imagination. Correct? So friends, in the conclusion, we should very well say that both reality and imagination are complementary. Correct? Though reality has its own limitations, it has the power to trigger imagination. However, it is important for us to go beyond reality, imagine, so that new realities get created. Okay? So since we need not have to pay any price for imagining big, it is our bounden duty to imagine big and bigger and converting those bigger things into reality. Thank you, friends. So thanks for patient hearing.